All right, folks, we got some more breaking news for you here about the school shooting in Florida recently. The shooter had ADHD, and according to his adoptive mother that passed away, she said that he was on drugs or being put on a prescription, and more than likely it was Ritalin, which, according to Dr. Adhd, which is focusing on natural health solutions, he says most of the medications prescribed from ADHD are either closely related to cocaine, Ritalin, and similar drugs, or are classified as I can't even pronounce the word, even though I probably could if I, amphetamines, Adderall, and others. Amphetamines and cocaine alike are known troublemakers. Did you hear that? They are known troublemakers, causing such undesirable side effects as permanent brain damage, heart valve damage, and other serious problems. However, ADHD drugs have been constantly hailed as breakthroughs and marvels of modern science, and their safety was rarely questioned. In reality, there were simply no long-term safety studies on these medications. I have searched for such studies on Medline and was surprised to find that many of the studies relating to safety safety lasted a grand total of 2 weeks. That's how long the testing on these drugs lasted, 2 weeks. If you have a little time, go to this link and find out more for yourself, okay? Consider also that brain damage caused by long-term use of a drug. Now, before I go any further, folks, I want to mention to you that he was very depressed, okay? The other thing that's without question a red flag is a few days after the shooting, or immediately after the shooting, they took his brother and put him in a mental institute. So against his will. Think about that. So now we have two brothers that are probably both on drugs because of, they're both without parents and they grew up in hard times, and, this has caused traumatic conditions. This has caused mental problems for them, and now they're on drugs. But do you think that this shooting and the shooting for Tony Lanza and all these other school shootings, children shooting up other children, is ever going to be pinned upon these drugs? Absolutely not. It's one of the biggest cover-ups. Every one of these situations where a young person, has shot other people has always been a contributor to drugs. Just look at the guy with the orange hair that went into the Batman movie and shot up that. Look at his eyes. He's on drugs. There's no question about it. So this is the pharmaceutical industry that Donald Trump is going to deregulate and going to make it cheaper. It's going to make it less cost for Americans to get these drugs. So this is witchcraft, pharmakia, and sorcery, folks. Magic potions that the science world hails as marvels of modern science. Do you see what's happening? Do you see why this will never, ever be discovered? Because they will bury this. And they will be there to pressure and push the whole idea that this guy that shot up this school, that in my opinion snapped, that he's got to die. He's going to receive the death penalty. He's going to be the one thrown under the bus when he was forced to take these drugs against his own will because of the marvels of modern science. Do you see the hypocrisy in this? You're not going to hear CNN. You're not going to hear Fox News. You're not going to hear any of your major media outlets. You're not going to hear anybody that really has any influence in society ever talk or breathe or mention above their breath that this is related to the drugs that are being given to those that are ADHD. These drugs have been known to cause terrible, terrible side effects to the children that are placed on these drugs. But why is it that they continue to push these drugs on the children? How come nobody stops it? This is what just caused 17 people's lives to be taken. Because a young man's mind snapped. Because of his depression. And probably because 2 days, and this is documented facts, 2 days prior to the shooting, he went to see his therapist. This is facts. This is what we know. Not to mention that the absolute insane irresponsibility of this retired analyst that is supposed to be protecting our country when he wasn't retired. But he said in his own interview, he said, we've been going over and over in our minds, my wife and I, trying to figure out where did we miss it? Did we miss something? Yeah, you missed something. You never looked. You never ever took the time to look to see who this individual was. Because all you had to do is look at his Instagram account, his Snapchat account, and it's all public information out there. They never took the time. This guy that's supposed to have several years, over 20 years of a career in the intelligence sector of the military. But you're not going to hear about this, people. Nobody's ever going to put all this together of this incredulous negligence on this retired military veteran, that was his job, was to protect from attacks. And he had a monster living under his own roof. No, he didn't have a monster. He had a young man that was totally, completely confused and messed up on drugs that would be given to him from the pharmaceutical industry and his doctors. But that's never going to be brought out. Because Satan is the god of this world, and he is the one that's pushing pharmakia, witchcraft. He's the one that's pushing sorcery. Folks, I just shared with you just yesterday how that all these scientists are on just psychedelic drugs. How Einstein was on psychedelic drugs. How drugs are taking over this world. It's a drug-induced generation. And they want to be hypocrites and say, oh, our children are being shot up in schools. Stop the drugs! Stop the drugs! It's not about the guns. It's about the drugs. You think anybody out there is as angry as I am? You think the parents of these children that just were killed, you think they would be against the pharmaceutical industry? They probably on drugs themselves. This is a generation that is drowning. And they don't care they're drowning. And sadly, anybody that tries to help them from drowning, they'll be drowned with them. They'll go down with them. Folks, this goes back many, many, many years. The ADHD being connected to drugs that are causing serious side effects. You want to end up dead? You want to end up in jail? You want to end up in a court of law where they try to drag up things and try to find things on you and try to false accusations and trying to demonize you, you start fighting against the pharmaceutical industry. You know how much money is invested in the stock market, in the pharmaceutical industry? Those in society that are supposed to be upstanding citizens that are investing in drugs that are killing our children. Do you know how many people are invested in the drugs that caused this shooting? But nobody wants to deal with it because of the greed, because of money, because of the love of money. Go take a look sometime you get a chance. Go look at the stock market and see how much a share is for pharmaceutical drugs. Go take a look sometime. See what's doing well in the stock market when everything else is not doing well. Why would it do well in times of depression? Why would it do well in times of recession? Why would drugs do well during that time? Because people get on drugs during that time. Because they go and see their therapist, and their therapist puts them on cocaine, poppy, opium, amphetamines. I know I'll probably lose a lot of my listeners. If I lose you, if you stop listening to this program, it's because you're a hypocrite. You're a hypocrite. Folks, I'm going for the jugular. I'm tired of skirting around the issue. I'm going for the jugular now. Bringing this thing down. This is not patty cakes. Not when children are being slain in our schools. It amazes me how many people that say that they're against the shooting of our children, but they're all for the drugs that caused the shootings. In every instance, almost every single instance in the shootings that have just taken place in the last 5 years, just look at the last 5 years, even Sandy Hook, all related to drugs. Lanza was on drugs. All drugged up. Just look at the Greek word for witchcraft. It's pharmakia. This guy we're looking at right now in this website, he's Dr. Arturo? Yeah, Dr. Arturo. Volpe, I guess his name is. Natural Health Solutions. Did you know that the number one target in this hour, they're killing them off left and right, are people like this? They're killing off the natural health doctors, or not doctors, but even though they call themselves a doctor, they've been to school to be a doctor. But they're treating these conditions with natural means instead of man-made synthetic drugs. I'm going to tell you again, these doctors that push these drugs that have side effects that cause suicide, and you don't give a drug that has side effects for suicide to somebody that has a problem with depression. I mean, how stupid, how oxymoron is that? Well, this kid's got a problem with depression, so we're going to put him on a drug that the side effect is depression. The side effects could be suicide. Unbelievable. And nobody cares. Let's read just a little bit more of this. Consider also that brain damage caused by long-term use of a drug is one of the hardest things to prove without cutting the brain open and looking for physical evidence. Consequences may be such hard to define events as decreased initiative tendencies towards depression, and so on. To clarify identities such effects in humans, we would need to have groups of children, all of which the same diagnosis, some of whom are treated with a medication and others with a placebo. And they would have to be followed for a decade or longer. Such studies may be desirable, but they are simply not going to happen. Nobody wants to do these tests, long-range tests, and waste the money on these long-range. So what do? What do? They use rats. He says, at long last, several recent rat studies at least raise legitimate concerns that the long-term use of Ritalin causes some form of brain damage. Who would have ever guessed? Juvenile rats were administered Ritalin at doses equivalent to those most commonly prescribed for children. In adult-treated rats showed large increases in learning, helplessness behavior, suggesting a tendency towards depression. So let me get this straight. This young man that shoots up this school, but the people he's staying with said he's the nicest guy, he's really good with the animals, didn't show any signs of any problems, no red flags, but he has guns. And they did say, notably, that he was depressed. So that's a red flag, right? Obviously not to this family. Another observed difference was that previously medicated adult rats had no interest in cocaine. This might seem like a positive outcome, but in this circumstance, it really isn't. Rats generally like cocaine, and the loss of interest suggests that treated rats lost some degree of their capacity to experience pleasure. In other words, they become immune to it. Or not immune, that's not the word I was looking for, but anyway. In other words, it's like alcohol. You can handle more and more of it. The more you get used to it, you can handle more and more. Your tolerance level goes up. So, a little bit more here. You may wonder why these studies were performed only now. It may be a coincidence, but parents of many older stimulant drugs have either expired or are in the process of expiring, and a newly patented non-stimulant drug for ADHD has recently been released. Did you all know that? A new drug has recently been released for ADHD. I wonder if this young man was on that new drug. He had just visited his therapist a few days before, and they threw his brother into a mental institute, probably to keep him from speaking to anybody. Many doctors and parents are excited about this new drug, precisely because it is not a stimulant. But are we again jumping from premature conclusions? Are we again assuming safety when we simply do not have all the facts? So that's very interesting how that these pharmaceutical industries and how that it gets pushed through the government and gets accepted, and the testing only lasts a couple weeks, and that they put our children on it. And the pharmaceutical industry gets away with murder. I guarantee almost all your politicians, I guarantee you all your officials, all these people in high positions in our country, whether it be in military, whether it be in the police, whether it be judicial, whatever, hospitals, that they all have stock invested in the pharmaceutical industry. Guaranteed. Every president that's ever been president in this country, going back several decades, probably had investments in drugs in some fashion. Not to mention all the drugs we pushed or brought over here from other countries, the opium that we brought in, the cocaine we brought in through the mafia. Folks, it's just total hypocrisy. So I get a little bit upset when I hear the hypocrisy that's coming out of the schools, that are these parents coaxing their children to give interviews saying, stop the guns. The guns aren't the problem altogether. It's the drugs that are altering the minds of these people that are shooting up other people.